privilege today to introduce to you Attorney General Jefferson Sessions, and Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Nielson. This is probably the first time in the history of this district that we've had two cabinet members appearing at the same time in the district. So without further ado, I'll allow General Sessions to speak, and then Secretary Nielson will be speaking.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Steve. It's good to be with you. 28 years in the Department of Justice, young man that you are. And he is the new Rod Rosenstein, I got to tell you. So he worked under Rod here, and they've done a great job. This has always been known as one of the better United States Attorney's offices in the country. So we appreciate the challenge you have and the crime problems that we have in the country and in here. Secretary Nielson, I want to congratulate you on your strong bipartisan confirmation vote last week, and I've worked with you previously. You were chief of the chief of staff to General Kelly when he was the head at Department of Homeland Security, and you are ready to take over. Good luck, and you can know that we are big fans of you. And your work with General Kelly, even in the White House, is instilled and inspired confidence in you, and that's how I'm pleased to see you move aggressively upward. So I appreciated our briefing that we had just a few moments ago, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you to protect the American people and implement the President's ambitious agenda. Among other things, he sent us an order when I took office to reduce crime in America, not to preside over upward increases, but to actually reduce it. And so I want to recognize our FBI, DEA, ATF special agents here, the Department of Justice, and all our Homeland Security people that we work with, too, on a regular basis. You do terrific work. Protect the American people, and I'm proud to stand with you, behind you. But we know too well violent crime is up in many cases in our country. Last week, our department's annual National Crime Victimization Survey, which is different from the FBI numbers, but they come out similar, it shows that the rate of Americans victimized by violent crime is up by more than 13%. Some have suggested this is a blip. It's not a real increase in crime. I think that survey that just came out last week is further confirmation that we are indeed seeing a surge in violent crime. Murder is up, according to the FBI numbers, 20% in the last 2 years. This is the largest increases we've seen since the 60s. And it's just not acceptable. Over the last 2 years in this city, this city has experienced violence like we haven't seen in a quarter of a century. The violent crime rate is up by 1/3. Rape is up by 22%. Murder is up by half, 50%. Baltimore has a higher murder rate and a higher violent crime rate than Chicago, with less than a quarter of the population of Chicago. Strong and motivated policing is a key to dealing with the crime rate in most cities, in every city really. 85% of our law enforcement officers in a jurisdiction are state and local officials, and maintaining their morale, maintaining support for them, and training and resources are critical to crime. We've got to understand that this recent news article that Deputy Rosenstein was quoted in the last few days in the Baltimore Sun really touched on the challenges that we face. I think Rod was exactly right in his analysis, and we've got to revitalize and support our police, work together with our federal and officers, and move forward in a way that can actually reduce crime. That should be our goal. Not how many people go to jail, not how much money we spend, but are we reducing crime, making neighborhoods peaceful, safe, and prosperous? So we embrace that agenda, and we're working to carry it out aggressively. This year alone, the department has secured convictions against more than 1,000 gang members and targeted MS-13. With more than 10,000 members across 40 states, MS-13 is one of the most dangerous gangs in America. And make no mistake, it's a transnational criminal organization. It's based in El Salvador. I was there a few months ago, and it is the most violent gang in America today. The people of this community, you've seen it firsthand. In January, a 15-year-old girl, 15 years old, from near here in Gaithersburg, was stabbed 13 times with knives and a wooden stake by MS-13 members. Her killers filmed the murder so they could show their leaders back in El Salvador what they did. First, our goal with the Department of Homeland Security in partnership is to end the illegality rampant in the immigration system that nurtures much of this crime. As Attorney General, I've ordered our prosecutors to renew their focus on immigration offenses, specifically where those criminals have a gang nexus, a cartel nexus, a violent crime nexus. We've sent additional prosecutorial resources to the southwest border, created border security coordinators in each of our 94 U.S. attorneys' offices to enforce immigration laws with a special emphasis on criminals like MS-13 that have a nexus to our southern border. I've designated MS-13 as a priority for our OCDEF task forces. These task forces bring together a broad coalition of federal law enforcement, DEA, FBI, ATF, CSI, ICE, Border Patrol, Coast Guard, Secret Service, IRS. That's how we work together today. And I want to thank Secretary Nielson and the Department of Homeland Security personnel for the contributions, the invaluable contributions they make. So these are important steps. We've already delivered results. Together with our partners in Central America, we filed criminal charges against more than 4,000 MS-13 members and seized many firearms, vehicles, and assets. But we must recognize that traditional gangs like MS-13 have taken advantage of our porous borders and previously lax immigration enforcement. That's just a fact. If we accept lawlessness, then we encourage lawlessness. When people break our laws without consequences, we shouldn't be surprised when they continue to break our laws. We can establish a new system where people respect our laws. In recent years, our immigration system has been overwhelmed. The caseload has tripled since fiscal year 2009 and doubled since 2012. As the backlog of cases grew out of control, the previous administration in the immigration area closed nearly 200,000 pending immigration court cases, just closed them without a final decision in just 5 years, more than were closed in the previous 22 years. By closing them, basically they have legalized the person who was coming to court because they were illegally in the country. But under President Trump, we've already taken steps to bring down that backlog. We're completing, not closing, immigration cases. Under the Trump administration, our immigration judges completed 20,000 more cases last fiscal year than the previous one. We've hired 50 immigration judges since January, and we plan to hire another 60 in the next 6 months. Last week, I issued a memo to our Executive Office for Immigration Review, which makes clear that cases are to be resolved, either with removal order or a grant of relief to the petitioner. Appeals that are frivolous ought to be resolved quickly, and fraud ought to be documented and prosecuted. And finally, we will implement objective performance measures to ensure our judges are working fairly and efficiently. The American people, as well as those who come here and disrespect our laws, can be certain about this. We are enforcing the laws again as they were written. Since President Trump took office, border crossings are now at their lowest level in 45 years. This is a big achievement. A lot of it just simply from the clarity of his leadership and expressions. But that number can be zero. We can bring it down further. We can end illegality in America. It is not impossible. It's also, we got to ask Congress for some help too. I know we have a few things we'd like Congress to consider, and we'll be asking them to do so. And we can't wait longer. As yesterday's New York events showed in the starkest terms, the failures of our immigration system are also a national security issue. Since 9/11, the Department of Justice has prosecuted more than 500 people for terrorism-related offenses. And preliminary figures suggest that nearly 75% of those defendants were foreign-born. The President is exactly right to call attention to these issues and to how they affect our security. In just the last 2 months, we've seen 2 terrorist attacks in New York City, carried out by men who were here as a result of failed immigration policies. The diversity lottery, which makes no sense and has never made no sense, and chain migration. How did it happen? An individual won the lottery in Bangladesh. He came here. He then, through the chain migration process, brought his sister, and she brought her son, 20 years old, and he's the one that attempted to blow up the subway in New York. So this is the system that's operating today. Between 2005 and 2016, we admitted 9.3 million people under this chain migration policy, and each of those people may be able to sponsor further relatives as well. It's not a sustainable, commonsensical policy. So the President has proposed ending chain migration, switching to a merit-based system like they have in Canada, which I've studied, in Australia. That means welcoming the best and brightest and turning away the terrorists, gang members, and criminals. We should give priority to those who are likely to thrive here, such as those who speak English already and are highly skilled, not someone chosen at random or who happens to be somebody's relative. In short, it means looking at factors that indicate the applicant's likelihood of assimilation and success in the United States. So let me be clear. Ending illegal immigration is not hopeless. It can be done. Having a national legal immigration system that serves the national interest is not hopeless. We can do this. The Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security are partners in this effort. We are making progress, and we will continue to make more progress. For the first time, we have a president who is committed to this goal and talks about it boldly. If we follow the policies laid out by President Trump, I believe we will finally have the immigration system that's lawful and that the American people have asked for, one that serves our national interest, one that the people of this country deserve. Kristjen, it's great to be with you. Congratulations on your appointment, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Secretary.
I'll get that out of your way.
Oh, you're fine. Good morning. So you have to bear with me with a cold, but it was just too important not to be here today. So I might have to stop and have a sip of water in the meantime. I just wanted to thank Attorney General Sessions. Thank you for the invite. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for hosting us. And thank you to all of our partners, both in the Department of Justice, and of course we've got many DHS folks here. And I can't thank you enough for everything you do. So thank you. We were fortunate yesterday. I just want to start off by talking a little bit about the terrorist attack that the AG mentioned. We were fortunate yesterday that there were no fatalities. This terrorist was clearly planning to kill Americans. That was his intent. He showed up to do just that. And through a variety of different circumstances, we were lucky that no lives were taken, although 3 people were injured. I spoke with the New York mayor yesterday, as well as the police commissioner, and offered DHS's full support. As you know, we work in support of the state and local authorities, and we're always on standby to provide any additional information, to help in investigations, help in training, capacity building, and do what we can to help those on the front lines. While we're not aware of any specific credible threats today, we are taking additional security precautions and assessing what other security enhancements in response to yesterday's terrorist event. The President has been outspoken in his concern that more must be done to keep our nation safe, and we intend to do just that. As a result, the administration is putting in place new measures to keep terrorists from entering our country, some that the Attorney General mentioned, including intensifying our vetting of U.S.-bound travelers. We've talked a lot about that in the last few months. Securing our borders, reforming our immigration policies writ large, and placing targeted travel restrictions on high-risk countries. While we were also working to stop terrorists from radicalizing and recruiting within our borders. We are stepping up information sharing, making communities more aware of the threat, working with our private sector partners to fight terror propaganda online, and making sure that we have early warning tools in place to spot violent radicalization early enough to intervene. Finally, the administration is planning to modify our immigration system to end misguided and outdated visa systems, such as the extended family chain migration and the diversity visa lottery that the Attorney General mentioned. Instead, we do need to focus on merit-based system that the President has recommended, and as we've seen in Canada and Australia, that would better support our economy and the assimilation of new immigrants. Terrorists should realize from the past 2 attacks in New York that they will fail. Our people are resilient. Americans will not be intimidated, and they have the resolve to bring these fanatics to justice with the help of all of our state and local law enforcement and federal officials. So let's talk a little bit about MS-13, which is why we're here today, because we know that terrorism is only one of the threats that we face today in our country. We know that decades of failed immigration policies have encouraged law enforcement officials to look the other way, and these have had real consequences to our public safety. The American people have paid the price. One tragic example is the resurgence of MS-13 in our country. The brutality of MS-13 is unmatched. There are so many very unfortunate, scary, and violent anecdotes that we can explain, but let me give you just one. Only 10 miles from our nation's capital, gang members earlier this year ambushed, choked, and stabbed a victim more than 100 times, cut off his head, tore out his heart, and then buried him in a national park where families bring their children to play. We cannot stand for this type of violence in our communities. These savage criminals are in our communities, and they are a deadly consequence of our unsecured borders and our failed immigration policies. Under President Trump, this administration has taken action to change that, and we thank him for his leadership. I want to thank the brave men and women of ICE, Secret Service, CBP, and all of our DHS friends here today. This year, ICE arrested 796 MS-13 gang members and their associates. That's 83% more than last year. 39 of those were arrested in a single 30-day period as part of Operation Matador in the New York metropolitan area. All were male, and most were from El Salvador. Almost 1/3 of MS-13 gang members arrested in that operation crossed the border as unaccompanied minors. 3 of those arrested came to this country with special immigrant juvenile status. SIJ classification allows minors who need protection because of abuse, abandonment, or neglect to immediately apply for lawful permanent resident status. Our immigration system, the most generous in the world, offered these people a chance at LPR status, the privilege of legally living in the United States. In return for our generosity, unfortunately, these criminals took advantage of our system and became members of one of the world's most violent street gangs. MS-13 is a threat to our homeland security, and we've made it our mission to stop them, and we will. I'd also like to speak just a moment about border security, which is an integral part of this whole system that we are putting in place to protect our citizens. We're doing that by not only rigorously enforcing our immigration laws, as I discussed, but also taking steps to secure our borders. From the beginning of this administration through the end of the fiscal year, ICE made 110,568 arrests, 40% more than this same time last year. During this time frame, ICE removals also increased by 37%. In support of the President's executive order, we are strengthening law enforcement by hiring an additional 10,000 ICE officers. To put this in perspective, currently there are nearly 1 million aliens with final orders of removal, but today we only have 6,000 ICE deportation officers to remove them. This massive hiring action will give us more resources to uphold the rule of law. But we cannot simply arrest our way out of this public safety crisis. MS-13 is a cancer that will continue to grow, feeding on our immigration loopholes and bureaucratic bloat. I'd like to thank the AG for everything he's doing to help us with immigration judges on the border and all of the partnership of all the agencies at the department. Our immigration courts are backlogged by more than 600,000 cases. Together, we will reduce this backlog and ensure that cases are properly brought in an expeditious manner. More are added every day. Despite the lowest number of border crossing in decades, thousands of people are still attempting to illegally cross the border every day. Unfortunately, though apprehensions at the border decreased substantially during the first 4 months of this administration, apprehensions of unaccompanied alien minors have increased quite alarmingly over the past 4 months. We must do more. We have also seen an explosion in asylum claims, mostly with dubious allegations. We must look towards addressing the fraud and loopholes that exist in our asylum system today. Lax standards in the credible fear process have led to a backlog of 270,000 affirmative asylum cases, with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services and an additional 250,000 cases in the immigration courts. These backlogs, combined with unceasing flow of illegal immigration, make it difficult to remove illegal aliens in an expeditious manner. To put it in perspective, on average, it takes 682 days to complete one single immigration case. That's nearly 2 years. Many illegal aliens and visa violators must be released while they are waiting their hearings. Many of them disappear into the interior, making ICE's job more difficult and never appear before a judge. If we're going to stop MS-13 and the flow of illegal immigrants into this country, we need legislative action. I also look forward to working with Congress to pass legislation addressing the President's immigration priorities. Our first priority is to secure our southwest border. I'm headed to Texas right after this event to discuss the challenge we face securing our borders with the mayor, the governor, and the others throughout Texas. I'll be meeting with officials who are confronting directly the lawless sanctuary cities. I'll be meeting with the frontline officers of CBP and ICE to once again hear what tools and resources they believe they need to be successful in securing our nation. Not only are they on the front lines, but they know better than anyone what is needed and what they confront on a day-to-day basis. I'll also be traveling to the border to get an update on our border projects, specifically the border wall we are going to build in the Rio Grande Valley. Congressional action to fully fund the border wall is an investment in the protection of our country. We should all be clear on that. We must stem the tide of illegal border crossings, and a wall will help us do just that. We also need to remove illegal border crossings as promptly as possible. We're asking Congress to close the loopholes that unaccompanied alien minors and illegal alien relatives exploit to overwhelm our detention facilities and expand our immigration court backlog. DHS intends to hire 1,000 additional ICE attorneys, and we fully support the Department of Justice hiring 370 additional immigration judges. We will not stand by as this cancer spreads. MS-13 gang members are raping, killing, and torturing Americans. They are selling drugs and trafficking our children in our communities. They must be stopped. Attorney General Sessions and I have a message for the 10,000 MS-13 members in our country today. We are coming for you. You cannot hide. You cannot escape justice. We will bring all the power of the United States government to bear. We will not rest until we bring you to justice. We together are returning law and order to this country, and together with our state and local law enforcement officials, we are making America safe again. And I thank you for your time today.
Time for a few questions. Laura, to answer. Mr. Attorney General, the one here at CNN.
Hey.
Thank you for doing this. Could you address what specific steps your department is taking to address so-called lone wolf attackers like we saw in New York yesterday and also last month, who are maybe here legally but are influenced or inspired by ISIS?
That's a good question, and it's a very difficult challenge. We have, maybe 1 million or more people who've entered the country from terrorist-based countries where terrorism exists, and I have raised with the FBI and have become very aware of the size of the challenge that they face. So the previous administration proposed over 100,000 new refugees mostly from that region. So it just overwhelms the ability of the FBI to monitor them. There's a myth out there that we just have this power, this unlimited resources to surveil hundreds of thousands of people, even know who to surveil. They do a remarkable job. I have been incredibly impressed how often their efforts have stopped someone before a problem occurred, before an attack occurred, but it's just physically impossible to stop all attacks. So I think it's a good question you've raised, and we need to make sure that we are putting minimum stress on the Bureau or reducing the stress by virtue of vetting people carefully before they're admitted to the country. What's that? I voted absentee, yes, and I value the sanctity of the ballot, and I would say the people of Alabama are good and decent and wonderful people. I've been proud to serve for 20 years in the Senate, and they'll make the right decision, I'm sure.
John Brixey from the Baltimore Sun. The Baltimore Police Department has requested that the FBI take over the investigation of the killing of a Baltimore police detective last month. Is that an appropriate step, and when can Baltimore expect an answer?
We are always willing to cooperate as well as we can, and I'm sure the FBI will be considering that request, and will probably be able to act on it. It'll be their initial decision. And I would say the Sun did a really interesting piece, I think, on crime in Baltimore in the last few years, in which quoted Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein at some length, and it really raised the issues that you're facing here. The crime rate should not have increased here at the rate that it has. We've got to be very careful when we have a problem in a police department that we target the people who did wrong, but not demean the morale and the quality and the integrity of the entire department. And bad things start happening, and you can trace the surge in violence in this city to the riots and some of the reactions that occurred afterwards. And I am so hopeful that we can learn from that mistake and in the future do a better job of protecting the public safety of often the poorest of people in our cities.
The Baltimore Police Commissioner Kevin Davis says that the ICE raids in some Baltimore communities are hurting police efforts to reduce crime. What do you say to that? Do you consider Baltimore a sanctuary city?
Well, they've declared it so. We're reviewing things to make sure the details of each city. I see no justification whatsoever for any city, any jurisdiction, any state to take the view that someone who enters the country illegally and then commits some other crime should be protected from the federal law to be deported. And I feel very strongly about that. I would urge our city officials and county officials and sheriffs to review any such policies, to cooperate fully and completely with our federal ICE officers, as they have a lawful duty to remove people who are illegally here, and particularly those who commit crimes after they've entered.
What do you say about President Trump's outside counsel asking for a second special counsel?
Hold on, Jake. Jake,
Yeah.
get to you in a second. Hi, Dominique Perez, WY
YPR. The merit-based system that you were referring to that you want to put in place to get rid of the chain visa program, as you were referring to, and the diversity program, lottery system, that program just asking merit-based, what do you mean by that? And also, why do they have to be able to speak English?
Well, they don't have to. What Canada does is, I met with their people some years ago. They're very happy with their their system. People apply, and they're given points in an objective way. They do get more points if they already know in Canada French or English. They give more points based on their education. They give more points if they have certain skills Canada needs at that time. And they even get more points if they're younger, because they'll work more, maybe pay more taxes before they start drawing from the government. So those are things that I think we should consider in the United States.
Attorney General, we've got time for just a couple more. I want to make sure we
It seems as though through did not be eligible for unaccompanied minor status. Has that changed since then? They've been going through parents who are here illegally. Has that changed or not yet? Because the numbers are still very high.
Yes, as I mentioned, the numbers had gone down. The numbers have started to go up. And I think you're asking a couple different things. We've got a family reunification issue. When they come into this country, it's a combination of federal partners that takes care of them, as you know. HHS ends up housing them and caring for them in the interim while we look for a way within the United States to reunify them with their parents. This is a difficult process because we worry that this serves as a pull factor. We also worry that many of these children come here and unfortunately do not have family within this country or close family. And these are exactly the minors that unfortunately are then recruited by the gangs. They don't have enough perhaps supervision or family around them. Gangs also threaten the safety of any family that is here. So as we were talking about the MS-13 today, that's exactly who they prey on. So our hope is that we limit the number, limit the dangerous journey, and also limit the ability of the gangs to go ahead and recruit them.
Yes, Attorney General Kristjen Nielson from they may both be able to answer this. I'm from WBAL-TV here in Baltimore. You began your remarks by talking about the murder rate, the skyrocketing murder rate in the city, and yet there's very little evidence I've ever seen that the murders here in Baltimore have anything to do with MS-13. I'm wondering if you think it's fair to have made that characterization, why you chose this city to make this announcement when you both mentioned grisly murders that happen in a different county in our city.
Well, we know MS-13 in the region here is responsible for quite a number of the most brutal murders. They've been growing rapidly. They were knocked down in 2005 or 6 pretty significantly, but they've come back again. Usually, some of that is from new entrants from El Salvador. Some of it's people, encouraged to join the gangs locally. And so I don't know that the city itself has a high MS-13 murder rate. So you're probably right about inside the city itself. But this region, Northern Virginia, Islip, New York, Houston, Los Angeles, are the centerpieces of the most MS-13 violence. And they are the most violent gang in America, I'm sure, without doubt.
All right, we'll do last question in orange jacket.
Last month you said that you had no reason to doubt the accusers of Judge Roy Moore. I'm wondering if today on today's election day you stand by those comments.
Well, I answered the question as I knew it at the time.
All right, thank you. Jake, come up for a second separately. We'll do that.
All right, guys, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.